You're listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast brought to you by DraftKings with John Schuster. I'm Mike Luke. Schuster looking sharp right there. Great deal going on right now. You throw down $5 on an NFL game, which is the Super Bowl, and if your team wins, you get $280 in free plays. You got a 50-50 chance. All right, Shu. Sorry, it was just jetting home from the game. This game got way too close for comfort down the stretch. But at the same time, though, I'm actually okay with it because Arizona was still able to maintain and come out with the victory right here and got pressed a little bit right there. What say you, my friend?
I think this is a much better outcome than if Arizona had won by 20.
Right.
And I get feeling comfortable and all the rest of it, but you're up against a pesky, basically the cockroach of college basketball. And if there are UCLA fans out there, I mean that in the kindest possible complimentary way I can. You cannot kill UCLA.
Right.
They are smart. They're gritty. They figure out ways to hang around. They're good at scouting. They can exploit you in a number of different ways. And they had every reason in this game to go away and didn't until Arizona was able to hit some big shots in the last couple minutes. Arizona this was a night. It was kind of an adversity game. Arizona did some really interesting things and had to fight really hard to get a difficult W tonight against a really talented basketball team that I think, along with Arizona, can make a deep tournament run. This was, while it was uncomfortable in the second half, a fair amount of the time, Arizona's ability to do what was necessary late, I think, gives them, hopefully, an opportunity to grow as a team as we work our way down the stretch here.
All right, so now let's look at it from a couple different perspectives right here. First and foremost, Arizona, and I think what's maybe a little bit reassuring about this game, Arizona didn't even play. You didn't get great contributions from a lot of the guys that you would expect. If I were to tell you that Arizona was going to win this game, Shu, and that, you were going to win by, again, it was a more comfortable margin than the score, or it wasn't as comfortable a margin.
This was a two-possession game.
It really was. It really was.
But if I were to tell you that this was a 2 or 3 possession game where UCLA had chances, and it looked like they were going to close the gap as recently as the last 4 minutes.
If I were to tell you that Arizona was going to get not a ton from Benedict Matherin, Kerr Kriisa was also going to have some issues at the same time, shooting again. Azuolas Tubelis was going to be in and out of the lineup. Dalen Terry was going to be your best player. You're probably thinking to yourself, Arizona might have some problems here. And Jaime Jaquez is going to play as well.
I'm thinking exactly the opposite, because if you were telling me all of those things, I knew that you were clairvoyant and that was the way that Arizona was going to win this game. Because every time where you start a story, if I was to tell you a lot, it's totally different than what you'd expect. I get your point, and you're absolutely right. And the gist of it is Arizona's ability to find different ways to play, but the defense, as much as anything, may ultimately be the story here too. We talked last week about how if Arizona held UCLA to 75 points, we felt pretty good about the outcome going into it. Arizona held UCLA today into the mid-60s. So, defensively in 2 consecutive games, the Wildcats answered. You talked about Terry. It's nice to see that Terry got he got a lot of publicity tonight nationally, and that's nice to see, because he is one of Arizona's glue guys. He always shows up. He always contributes. He always does the dirty work. Mm-hmm. And it may be too much to expect, but if Terry can keep you honest from 3-point range, right, and show you a willingness to take that shot, it makes Arizona's half-court offense so much better. Because right now what teams are doing, one of the numerous things they're doing, but one of the key things that the opposition is focused on is backing off on Terry, because Terry is not consistent from the perimeter. This is not unlike what we saw in the early stages of Reggie Geary. Well, what we saw.
I knew you were going to go with that.
Of Luke Walton. Walton was at the game tonight, so the Walton comparison has a certain, element of, I guess irony or coincidence to it. But if the Arizona coaching staff can help make Terry a shooter that you have to defend, never a great shooter, but a shooter that you have to defend, that really helps Arizona in the half court and helps Terry be even a more well-rounded player than he is and was tonight.
All right. The great thing about this is that we try to get to as many comments, as many listeners, as many people as we possibly can. All right. So Nick Howard says, first of all, big win. Absolutely, this was a big win because obviously Illinois up to this point was Arizona's biggest win of the season. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Going into Champaign and doing that. This UCLA squad that we're looking at right now is a team that, let's be honest, if they were to be in the Final Four, if they were to play in the national championship game, heck, if they were to cut down the nets, I don't think anybody would be surprised in the least. This is a good team, and you also saw it too today, where UCLA got down by about 15, 16 points, and a lot of teams would have just kind of folded, especially in McHale. That didn't happen to this UCLA team. They got back into it, and I'll tell you what, when it got down to a 3-point game there late in the second half, I'm thinking to myself, okay, you've got a UCLA team that's tested. You've got a UCLA team that's been here before. Arizona's not really been in these type of spots before, but Arizona then goes on a 6-0 run and basically puts the gas down at that point. And I think that's what was reassuring about this performance, Shu.
And that's why it's the biggest win of the year and the possibly the most reassuring win, as you noted, for Arizona this season, because they beat a legitimate team that is battle tested and had to hold off while they were making a run. Everything UCLA had momentum and certainly had opportunities to get back into that game, but Arizona had enough to quell it. And those are growth games. And these are the types of games that eventually Arizona's going to have to win in the NCAA tournament. And that's what this is about. If you want to advance, you're going to come up against good basketball teams that can make things difficult, and you've got to grind your way through some tough times. And Arizona was able to do that tonight, and they did it tonight late in the game with a really interesting lineup that mostly did not include Matherin and mostly did not include Tabellas, who was
and that's the part that's crazy.
Who was very strong early. This was, and I'm not entirely sure, and maybe Lloyd is talking about this in some of the post-game conversation that we aren't able to hear because we're talking with you immediately after the game. But I'm curious about what the decision was to go into that. But if it was an effort to try to make Arizona tougher or to get a trial by fire with some other players, or a willingness to say, look, I don't care who you are, we're playing with the people who are playing harder tonight. Whatever it was, and whatever the reason was that went into them, there could be a variety of different things. The lineup that Arizona closed with and closed well with probably gives Wildcat fans some optimism as this thing progresses.
All right, so one guy, I want to get to Chad McDonald's here. Great name, Chad McDonald's. One of the most generic names you'll ever come across. He said, I've been saying Ballo is a beast. It's about time everyone takes note. You and I talked about this last game. I love when Ballo's in the game. I think that, and there was a sequence there in the second half where he was getting, where he got multiple offensive rebounds and kickouts that just created more of a, and again, I don't even think it resulted in points. But when he's out there, even when he's out there with Koloko, he's a presence that you don't necessarily always – that I don't know that anybody else on this team can replicate.
We talked about this, and Chad, thanks for your comments. I am taking note, by the way. I am taking note that Ballo is a significant contributor for what it is that Arizona does, and it's great. His development has been a wonder to see. Early in the season, we talked about how Koloko had made a huge jump. Now we're talking a couple months later about how Ballo has made a significant jump. If both of them on the floor at the same time are a problem. And
right,
I don't think, Mike, we necessarily expected that Arizona was going to run with that lineup a lot, but I'm glad they have, and I'm glad it's worked.
Right, for sure. What I think is when I look at this lineup, and we talked about this the entire season, what I think about is I think about position flexibility. And you look at this team right now, you've got a Kerr Kriisa, you've got a Benedict Matherin, you've got a Dalen Terry, who we're going to get to in just a moment. And if I think, and with all those three guys right there, then you bring in Pelle Larsson, who has become solid. Then you bring in Justin Kier. You've got Umar Ballo. You've got Azuolas Tubelis. You've got Christian Koloko. You look around on this team, and you've got a lot of different pieces that you can match with this squad. And I think that's what's really unique about this team. And you saw it out there tonight. If I were to tell you before the game that there was going to be a lineup for a good portion of the game where you were going to be going with a Kerr Kriisa, a Dalen Terry, a Pella Larson, an Umar Ballo, and a Christian Koloko, you're thinking to yourself, I don't know, that might be a little bit of a problem, but they're able to make it work. And I love the mixing and matching that occurs.
It's help and the willingness to do it. There's no real stringent approach here, it appears, which I've liked a lot throughout the course of the season. It seems to be there's an overall foundation of what Arizona wants to do. Arizona ultimately wants to get out in transition. They want to rebound well, and they want to force turnovers and then get easy buckets. And then from there, they hope that strategy wears teams down. Now, in the last 3 games, UCLA, ASU, and UCLA again have been very good at limiting Arizona in transition. So the Cats have had to be better on the offensive end in the half court, and sometimes that's been rough. And there were points in time where that was a difficult thing to watch as well. But beyond that general foundation, then from a lineup standpoint, Lloyd seems willing to try to figure out what piece works in the jigsaw puzzle.
Yes.
So he'll go with Ballo and Koloko, or he'll go with Tabellas and Koloko, or Tabellas and Ballo, or 4 wings in essence, or, there are a variety of different approaches that he has available to him, and he seems willing to utilize those as well. And I think, it's nice to see. I'm hopeful. It's nice that ability is there. The thing I'm hopeful about overall tonight is that when you have Larson in the game, Ballo in the game, Kyer in the game, guys who are off the bench are not hurting you. Right. And that gives Arizona a lot of opportunity once we get into the big games that matter in single elimination in mid and late March.
All right. I want to get to Dalen Terry here in a minute because I've been talking about him now for about 5 minutes. But you know what? Temptation makes the desire grow stronger. One thing, though, and Doug Allen put this out here, and we're going to get to KB Thiel's remark here in just a second. Matherin not on the floor in crunch time was a little bit of a head scratcher right there. Now, maybe he wasn't playing well. Maybe they didn't like his attitude. But in order for this team to go as far as it needs, I think everybody out here wants it to go, Shu. This is he's got to be the best player on this team. Or he's at least got to be the guy that is able to put his foot down game in and game out and be the guy that, okay, that's a top 10 pick out there. And for a good percentage of this game, he really wasn't that guy. And I think that was best. That's emblematic of the fact that he wasn't out there.
This is an interesting balancing act for any coaching staff because he probably is a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
Whether he has a top 10 lottery career or not remains to be seen, but he's probably a top 10 pick. Mm-hmm. And it was notable that late in the game, he was not in the game. So you wonder if behind the scenes, and we see certain things from a distance. I know folks who are joining us here have seen these too. And I think we talked about this briefly, a post game or two ago, that Matherin's had some frustrations here. And one of the frustrations that I noted that went beyond just having shooting struggles and maybe taking ill-advised shots that weren't within the flow of the offense was that if he'd get into the lane, he'd spend time complaining to the referees.
Right.
Maybe that's
and you've mentioned that. I want to hold on real quick. You've mentioned that throughout the season, though, that not necessarily just an individual player, but with Matherin, though, and I've noticed this as well, too. There's been some moments where it's just play ball, dude. Mm-hmm. Just play ball. You're the best player. You're the best player out there. You're certainly the best prospect out there. Just play ball and everything's going to come to you.
So here's why this is good. Not only this is about the best case scenario if that's what the coaching staff was doing,
right?
That they were saying, you know what, dude, if you're not going to play the way we want to play, we got some other guys back here who will do it instead.
Right.
Arizona just beat UCLA tonight, the number 3 team in the country, the favorite to win the conference, the team that dogged you a week ago in Los Angeles and did it without Matherin late in the game. Mm-hmm. If that isn't a growing experience, then what is? Right. This worked out that aspect of this. If Matherin is having, if what we're reading from a body language standpoint and an action standpoint if we're not overemphasizing that, and perhaps we are, but if we're not overemphasizing that and there's some stuff going on, there's some diva activity going on behind the scenes too, then the Arizona coaching staff was hopefully able to quell that, put it in its place, and Arizona just got a big its biggest win of the year without its best player on the floor late.
You know what I kind of
yeah, go ahead, man.
What I kind of think about it too, and I like what Tommy Lloyd did here. I think back to, and this was, man, I'm going to date myself here. I want to say this was the 04-05 season. This is when Arizona lost to Illinois, which I know is a bad word or a bad phrase around here, but it was, I want to say it was against Marquette. It was an out-of-conference game, and Lute was just done with Salim Stoudemire's attitude. I just don't – he either didn't play him, and again, I'm sorry, I'm trying to jog my memory. He either didn't play him against Marquette or he benched him for the last 10 minutes down the stretch in a close game. It woke Stoudemire up, and for the rest of the season, he was a different type of guy. All those attitude problems went away. I'm not saying that's the case with Ben Matherin because, quite frankly, I don't know. But there comes a point, though, when you're a coach where you almost have to do what's better for the team big picture, and if you don't like something you're seeing from Matherin, you've got to nip it in the bud because you've got a lot bigger goals going forward than just this game right here, Shu.
And this is a delicate balancing act. And a lot of coaches may not do that because a lot of coaches view, trying to get the 5-star as many and as often as you possibly can. And if you have this reputation of being something of a disciplinarian who, benches these guys, then maybe they're concerned about word getting out and that not being something that allows you to keep the pipeline going. But if indeed Lloyd was gutsy tonight because that coaching staff is pissed off with an attitude and got the win in the process, you couldn't ask for a better scenario. Right. And we'll find out. I mean, like we found out with Stoudemire was huge.
He rebounded well from it.
Yeah. And if this is a similar case, then hopefully that's obviously really good news for Arizona because, Mike, in the end, you're right. Matherin's one of two guys on the team and probably the most noteworthy guy on the team. We saw this in the first month of the year that can get a bucket when Arizona struggles in the half court. So he needs to be on the floor on a regular basis because he's the one guy in big games who gives you a shot to work through struggles on the offensive end if the half court isn't flowing very well.
All right. One thing, though, that I want to talk about real quickly before very important read. Mikhail was awesome today. I've got to give the folks there a lot of credit. I've been a little down on him, but this felt like old time Mikhail right there. And quite frankly, if you can't get up for UCLA coming to town for a 6 o'clock game, it's not like this is one of those 9 o'clock preposterous tip-offs, then I don't know what we're really doing right here. I got to give a lot of kudos to the fans there. As Sean Seeley correctly pointed out, dirtbags should be nuts tonight, I would imagine. So, you know what also is nuts, but in a good way? The DraftKings Sportsbook app. Code word PHNX. Here's the deal. Throw down $5 on a game, and there's only one game. It's the Super Bowl. And if you win that, new customers only, you get $280 in free plays. That simple, that easy. You want to make it happen. Don't fight what you already know you should be doing. Worst case scenario, you lose $5. Best case, you win $280. Eligibility restrictions apply. Arizona only, 21 and up. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. They'll get you right back on your feet. And again, Arizona only. All right, let's get to some of these comments right now. Now, let's see here. Who do we got right now? All right, we've got a lot. This is all right. Let's see here. Andre Veras. This is a great win, obviously, but means nothing if we lay an egg on Saturday versus USC or Monday at ASU. I'm not particularly worried about the ASU game, but we're going to talk a little bit about the USC game, though, coming up here in a moment, though. Again, guys, so sorry. We got over 200 comments right now, so I'm just kind of
fantastic.
All right, this is something I did want to talk about. Kerr throwing the ball into the student section was annoying. Like, dude, we're a top 10 team. Don't act like this is some crazy upset. I will say this. The kid's good, but some of the antics are getting a little bit annoying on my front.
Did that one bother you?
I'm more of a guy that, and again, I'm taking this from my high school varsity career. Junior varsity, all the way down to freshman. I don't know. Like I said, there's just – to me, if you don't play well, and I know he hit the big three, but I'm looking at his numbers right here. You got 0 of 12, then you've got 2 of 13, then today you got 4 of 15. You're kissing the floor. Man, you're not playing well. To me, that annoys me, yes. When you're not playing well and you're still spiking the football, that to me is a little bit of an issue.
Well,
maybe it's a superficial issue maybe, but it's an issue nonetheless for me.
Well, he certainly has no problem being a target for the rest of this league. If you were to ask the rest of the Pac-12 who they despised most from a player standpoint, Kriisa would be this year's Reggie Miller. He's at the top of the list. He's never going to change. This is how it is. And you know what? Sometimes it's a fan's game too. It's not one of those. And I get that this is going to be hypocritical and sometimes inconsistent, but the reality is that this is what we're going to deal with. Okay, take it or leave it. This is what we're dealing with. He's an excitable player. He likes getting the crowd involved. He likes playing at the tail. He feeds off that emotion. And you know what? It's not the worst thing in the world if, it's worse if you're flipping off the UCLA bench, which kind of symbolically, I feel like that timeout in the last minute of the game maybe was. But that is an aside. If the game is over, and Kriisa's throwing the ball into the crowd, hey, the crowd's part of this as well. You said Mikhail was great. There were a number of occasions where Lloyd was trying to get the fan base involved at key times, where Kriisa tries to get the fan base involved, where Terry tries to get the fan base involved. They understand the reputation of Mikhail, and I think maybe they've understood that the reputation hasn't lived up right now to what it ultimately can be. It's eventually going to get there because I think this program is going to be good for a long time to come. And then Mikhail is going to be a pain in the ass and an intimidating location for other teams to come into. This was the night where maybe it was finally a return to what we've come to expect. And if Kerr needs to throw, if Kerr needs to wave to the crowd and Terry needs to wave to the crowd and Lloyd needs to try to get him to stand up and then Kriisa is throwing, a basketball into the second level again, you know what? So be it. You won a big game tonight. There you go.
But I want to give Dalen Terry a lot of credit right here. Now, I'm usually wrong on most things. John Schuster is generally right on a lot. The one thing that whatever. My mom chuckled at that just now. But the one thing that I do, Dalen Terry was a guy that I thought was going to be incredibly important for this team before the season even started. And the reason why, well, there's a couple different reasons. First and foremost, he's kind of the only guy on the team that can replicate the skill set that he possesses out there. He's legitimately 6'8", and he can handle the ball pretty well. He's a very good secondary ball handler. He can pass. He can score in weird ways. He's definitely not a shooter, as we've seen before. But, and I know John Schuster hates comparisons. I like comparisons. And you know what? I'm going to throw it out here, and John Schuster can push this away. But what I'm about, he's got a little bit of that Rondé Hollis Jefferson, Andre Iguodala to him, and that you can win with guys like that. You really can. Now, he can't be my best player right now, but if you're to tell me that he's my third or fourth best player, I'm taking that every single day of the week.
Well, there's also a difference maybe between best and most important. And Terry may be higher up that list when you're talking about most important because there's not that there isn't a willingness from other Wildcats to do dirty work as well. Ballo is an example of that. Larson is a less athletic example of that. But Terry is at the top of the list.
Less athletic.
As far as a skill set and a willingness to perform a lot of those things. And yeah, you can put good teams around guys like that. And your previous examples were guys who were on teams that made deep tournament runs. And hopefully Terry can help Arizona do a lot of the same.
All right. One other thing, too. If you're going to be involved with a deep tournament run, the best place that you want to line yourself with is the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Code word PHNX. You throw down $5 on a game. There's one game, the Super Bowl, you get $280 in free plays. That simple, that easy. I like the Rams in the Super Bowl. What say you, John Schuster?
Oh, boy, I like the Rams, too.
A lot of people think that Tom Brady's playing in it. They're wrong. And you know what? If you go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX, you're going to find that out. Throw down $5 on that game, new customers only. You get $280 in free plays. That simple, that easy. Make it happen. Okay. Now, back to the Arizona UCLA game that we were watching just now. I'm just going to ask you quite frank. You watched Arizona.
Frank away, Mike Luke. Frank away.
Which is a better basketball team?
I think Arizona's better than UCLA.
I do too.
I think Arizona has more weapons than UCLA. But if you both told me at the end of the year that they were both Elite Eight teams or even Final Four teams or perhaps beyond, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I would not be surprised. And there was a comment by one of the regulars, I'm not going to remember who it is, it might have been Nick, I apologize if I'm wrong about that, who said they thought that he thought Arizona and UCLA were going to face each other in March, and I don't think he was talking about the Pac-12 tournament. If that happened to be if that happened to be the case, that would be that means that both teams had real deep runs and really impressive years, and they battle. I think Arizona has a little bit more versatility and obviously the potential advantage on the inside, which they were able to use at key blocks tonight, which helped them out. And Arizona closed the gap. That's a funny word when we talk around here about what
Arizona ASU
say about ASU basketball and have for about 30 years. But Arizona in the short term closed the gap on UCLA's tenacity tonight. And that I liked a lot. As irritating as UCLA is for Arizona fans, because they should be, because it's a rivalry thing, the grit that team has and the veteran leadership that they bring, you can't say anything bad. If you were a fan of that team, you'd love that team. They just do not give up. Right. And it was, and they've got very much of an East Coast vibe. They've got very much of an East Coast, really good Cincinnati version vibe. They're just, I don't know what the vibe is, but they don't go away. Mm-hmm. And that's whatever that element of tenacity and veteran leadership is that they have and that they bought into, and the chemistry around it, they make it work. This was not an easy win for Arizona tonight, but it was an excellent win in the regular season that I think the Cats needed to have. And I'm glad to see that Arizona proved, we've thought on and off this year, they're a tough team. They keep fighting. And then we saw that UCLA game a week ago, and it was, they were flat and kind of out of it. UCLA armed lengthened, and then the ASU game wasn't very impressive. You started to worry a little bit. Arizona didn't play across the board particularly well tonight. And as you noted, Tabella started great, and it was a great idea that Arizona was able to go to him, and it looked like he was healthy. And then, they were able to figure some things out, but UCLA hung around in a game that they just as easily could have lost by 20 and had a shot to win, and Arizona still got the W in this one. So if you're asking me who I think is the better team, I think Arizona has more weapons. I think Arizona's the better team, but I expect both of these squads to make deep tournament runs. I'm going to give a little bit of a shout out here to Anthony Humbert. I think he makes a great point here. He says Arizona has a higher ceiling, but UCLA has a higher floor, if that makes sense. I feel that. And you know what? Quite frankly, I agree with that. I think Arizona's got a higher margin for error. But if you were to ask me which team was more likely to maybe get upset, probably Arizona, huh?
Yeah. But that's why we have such great people here on the AZ Wildcats podcast. Again, hit subscribe, go to Go PHNX, get a membership there. You get a free Back the A t-shirt for it's free if you get the membership, all kinds of other good stuff. T-shirts there, decals, all kinds of good stuff. But I think that's a really good point there that Anthony makes, that Arizona has a higher ceiling, but UCLA has a higher floor. I'm gonna roll with that. All right, now we've got this win, or they've got that win. Unlike some people, John Schuster and I did not play at the University of Arizona basketball. I know a lot of people have said, "Man, you guys look familiar." It's not from playing at McHale, no matter what you do think. Let's talk a little bit about this USC game coming up, because you have made the case that Tony Gimino disagreed with that when you said that I think UCLA or you were more concerned about matchups stylistically with USC than you were UCLA. That game is right around the corner. Again, another early tip off, I believe 3:00. Yeah. None of this 9:30 stuff. All right. what concerns you about USC? And I'll tell you if you're right in your concerns.
Oh, wow. All right. This is like grades.
Yeah.
UCLA's length and overall defense and athleticism, I think, can be a real problem for a team like Arizona. Arizona has a notable inside advantage size-wise against a lot of teams, and against UCLA, that may be the case. I can see Arizona's inside game being very problematic, having real problems against what it is that USC does. The advantage I think Arizona has is they also play good defense, and USC can be inconsistent on the offensive end. I probably need to hedge the bet a little bit here in that I think you described my quote unquote disagreement with Anthony to some degree. Anthony was correct in that he said he thought UCLA was better than USC. Therefore, that was a tougher matchup. Makes perfect sense. But as you noted, from an overall matchup standpoint, I think USC can be a real problem here for the Cats. And I think that's going to be a grinder. And it would not surprise me if Arizona does not get the W at McHale on Saturday, especially the way they played coming off such an emotional performance in a game they had to have. That said, one of your commenters down here made a statement in regards to how he didn't think that, and this is an old Lute Olson mentality that works in terms of trying to win the conference. You don't want to have too high highs so that you have lower lows.
Right.
You want to be able to level things off a little bit so that you can get, you don't want it to be a wash. You know, you beat UCLA, but you lost to USC. Well, it's 1-1 on a homestand. That's not what you ultimately like. Totally agree. However, I would suggest that based on this win tonight and getting a wash between UCLA, a home and home wash, and if there are folks who didn't see this win, you see Arizona winning by 10 double figures at home, UCLA winning by double figures in LA. It's complete wash. Doesn't matter who you think played best, blah, blah, blah. All the rest of it, they washed each other. So you've got one team with 2 losses, another with 3 losses, and both of those could be number 2 seeds in the tournament. I think Arizona, barring a really catastrophic series of setbacks here, went a long way toward enhancing its position as a 1 or 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. Had they lost this game, I think they're maybe on the 3 line and have a lot of work with not a lot of games left to try to make it up.
And what's exciting? Go ahead. Sorry.
No. This is a big win because of that, because Arizona doesn't have a lot of those on the schedule. And now you're looking at the possibility of being maybe at worst a 5-loss team heading into the NCAA tournament with metrics that are really good. It's hard to suggest that Arizona wouldn't be a 1 or 2 seed at that point. And that's where you want to be as you head into the field. All
right. The thing that I look at, though, and we've talked about this quite a bit. And by the way, CJ Mack just said, what kind of ale are you drinking? Nice try. I am actually drinking a vanilla Coke with no ice. I'm not that cool right now. So I will say this. You look at this Arizona team right now, and I think what's kind of exciting about this, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit, is that you don't really see any, outside of about 3 teams, you don't see a team that can beat this team, at least in my opinion. It's UCLA, it's USC, and it's Oregon. This team is not very upset proof. I realize that I'm kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth right here when I said that Arizona is more likely to be upset than UCLA, but I meant that by good teams, not by bad teams. And I don't see anybody in the conference, quite frankly, that can upset this team. So if you get past USC right here, then you're looking at Oregon, which you get at McHale. You're already done with UCLA. You're going to be running off a lot of wins right here, Shu.
Yeah, there's definitely the potential for that to happen. And one of the things that Arizona's done a very good job of, as we're aware, is hammer teams because they go on very impressive runs and they can get 15, 20, 25-point Ws. And against the second tier or below in this conference, that's something that they've done a very good job of. Now, we've also seen Arizona teams in the past and other real good conference teams go into a place like Washington State or a place like Colorado or, areas that they shouldn't probably lose. The other, they're better than that team, but you have a tough road night. You can't shoot. The other team's on a roll. It happens with regularity in college basketball. So is it possible that Arizona loses one of those games? Sure. But the way that they've played up to this point, they seem to have the talent in place where their chances of winning in sizable margins that gives them, as some of the scrollers below and you have noted that margin of victory that makes it likely that they're going to be able to, that the chances of them pulling off those kinds of victories and getting caught multiple times in a game that they shouldn't lose isn't very good, which is great because it's going to help. It's going to enhance your seeding now as a result. And again, obviously, that's where you want to be once you get into the tourney.
I'm going to drop a music reference right now for our guy, KB Thiel. John Schuster won't get this, even though John Schuster knows far more about music than I do. He says, Iron Mike messed around and dropped a triple-double. I went to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and left the homie's house paid. I'll leave it on that. John Schuster obviously doesn't know what that is. But I do think, though, that this team right now, if I were to tell you before the year, Shu, that we would be keep in mind, we did not play there. Again, a lot of people think that we did or not. I am not Joe McClain. This is not who would you be?
They're to the best of my knowledge, there weren't all that many Wildcats who were as prematurely bald as I was.
That's true.
Yes.
I'm not Kirk Walters.
I'm in very wow. Yeah, I'm in very unique. I'm in very unique territory there. Yeah. My struggles on the inside were similar to Walters, so that might not be the worst comparison.
I do think this team is very close, though, and I think Tommy Lloyd is pretty close, though, to locking up National Coach of the Year because, like we talked about, Arizona, Oregon at home could be a tough game. By the way, everybody needs to show up for that game. You need to bring the same backing of the A that you brought back there. But again, this is a team right now. You're 18-2. Looking at this schedule along with the Pac-12 tournament, let's say you drop, let's just go liberally here and say you drop 2 more games in conference. I think that's the absolute maximum I could see them losing. Say you drop 2 games. Then you drop maybe you drop the championship game in the Pac-12 tournament. You're looking at a team right now then that is doing the math in my head,
25-5, somewhere.
More than that because
they're a 5-loss team. They're a 5-loss.
You're about 30-5. You're about 30-5 going into the.
You're a 1 or 2 seed in the tournament.
Yes, exactly.
And that's why this game was so significant tonight.
So that's why we've got a 100%. I mean, you've got to 100% be ecstatic with how this team is. I don't want to say you're playing with house money, but if you were to tell me going into the year that this was a national championship team, I'd be a little bit surprised by that. But one thing, and then before we're going to sign off right here, we're going to be back with you, the USC post-game show. Then here's how committed we are to the U of A fans. I am traveling up to Fort Collins, Colorado starting Monday, but guess what? I am stopping in the middle in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to be able to watch the U of A ASU game and be able to bring it live, the post-game show, with you and everybody out there and John Schuster. So I'm very excited about that.
Man, if you were really committed, you'd stop in Las Vegas, New Mexico, or somewhere in that real empty territory. Northern New Mexico, right on the border, that's when you know that the commitment is truly there.
Yeah, so that's when you back the A and you back the A to the absolute.
I know you're a big Mexican food fan, by the way. El Pinto in Albuquerque is pretty darn good.
My mom got one of her masters at UNM. So you know what? If it's good enough for her for a year, it's good enough for me for an evening. So I'll throw it to you like that. One thing though that Scott Schlittenhardt said, it's going to be interesting to see what exactly happens though with Arizona, Oregon, because Arizona's on a 9-game losing streak to Oregon right now. Granted, that's a totally different regime, but that's when I look at this schedule outside of this USC game, Shu. That's the only other one that I can see them dropping. So,
again, and that's correct. I mean, if USC, I think Arizona's going to be the favorite to beat USC at home. Arizona should beat USC, but I can see that certainly going the other way. I think the matchups are difficult. There are going to be a lot of times in that game where it's going to look really ugly and very frustrating. It's not a huge USC has the talent to make a deep tournament run as well. Apparently, our pal Joe Lenardi at ESPN has Oregon as one of the first 4 out of the NCAA tournament. 3 teams from the that's absolutely insane. That is. I
saw that.
Absolute insanity.
Bill Walton agrees with you.
Yeah. All right. That's like, you got to be kidding me. Oregon's going to be scary. And Oregon when they're playing well, and you have to figure that with Altman as this thing moves along a little bit, we're still in early February here. There's room for Oregon to get even better. They're a problem. And they're going to be a problem for a lot of basketball teams, assuming they can continue to improve. So I can see that being the case as well. And again, you look back at the great Olsen teams, you look back at even some of the really talented Miller teams, and once in a while on the road, you lose a game against an inferior opponent. So it's always possible that can happen. But all things being relatively equal, the way Arizona's played this year, those are outside of those games. Yeah, you're right. Outside of those games and being in the conference, I'm not sure Arizona's going to be an underdog up until the Pac-12 tournament. Right. So obviously those are games that a lot of folks think they ought to win.
Before I sign off here, I want to make a point here, and I disagree a little bit. First of all, we appreciate everybody out there that contributes. You guys are all awesome. Without you, I'm not here. Schuster's not here. So Aaron Walsh says, why doesn't anyone mention Miller's name on TV? These are his recruits. Props for Lloyd to be able to hold on to most of them. See, I don't necessarily agree with that. And again, it's just my opinion. I think everybody knows, and I think Miller gets plenty of credit for this roster. And, we talk about it. We talk about it all the time. And again, there are obviously people that don't like Sean Miller. We talk about it all the time that this, you got to give him a lot of kudos here. I think, though, where there's maybe a little bit of a disconnect, and I mean, not a disconnect, that's not really the right term, but Tommy Lloyd has unleashed this team in a way that Sean Miller never would have. That, to me, is the difference. Miller gets a lot of kudos for putting and assembling this roster together. No doubt about it. But let's be honest here. This team is not sitting here at 18-2 and ranked 5th or 6th in the nation with Miller coaching. Again, they're probably in the top 25, but it wouldn't have looked like this, and they wouldn't have been this good. I feel very comfortable in saying.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about a little different dynamic if Miller is still the coach here. We're talking about a team that we see a lot of potential talent, and maybe they can continue to improve over the course of the last month and make things pretty interesting. They're probably tournament bound, but, at this level, almost certainly not a couple things. The TV broadcasters did mention Miller with some regularity.
Yeah.
As so it's not like he wasn't mentioned on the television broadcaster, or people aren't aware of that, or he's one of those guys that name you shall not say. Right. That isn't happening. So Miller is getting credit for being the guy who recruited a lot of Lloyd's players, and I think next season Miller's going to get a good coaching job. It's going to be a major conference second-tier team, but or a really high-profile, slightly lesser conference team. But I think there's going to be an AD out there who's going to look at, what Miller, generally speaking, did at Arizona, what he did at Xavier, that none of the, sanctions were ultimately against him. They just happened, wink, to be against all of his assistant coaches. But they're going to be able to make up a number of excuses to believe, they can come up with a lot of reasons why Miller can be a beneficial coach for their program. But for the folks watching out there, just a simple question that Mike touched on. Just be honest. You've seen this year's Arizona team. Do you believe that this team would have been good with Sean Miller as their head coach? The question is as simple as that.
It's as simple as that. For John Schuster, I am Mike Luke. Want to remind you of one thing. We're going tomorrow. Lamont Lovett, color commentator for the U of A football team, is going to be joining me at 7:15. Then Saturday, if you haven't had enough of me and Shu, or Shu and myself, however way you want to put it, well, you know what? Buckle up, because we're going to be back. And then Monday as well, I will be joining you from Albuquerque. Shu will probably be here in Tucson. So, again, for everybody out there, can't thank you enough for all of your comments, all your remarks. You guys are the ones that make this one go. Schuster, I'll be seeing you shortly. For everybody else out there, thanks so much for listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.